What's up, guys? Let me know if you guys can hear me. All right. Anybody there? We got John. We got Nix. All right. You guys can hear me pretty good? All right. Let's get started. I'm sure quite a few more people will hop in pretty soon. We got 22 right now to start. All right, guys. So if you haven't noticed, there's a post on Reddit. It's going around social media right now. I don't know if you guys can see it. I put it as the thumbnail right about there. I don't know if it's flipped. Anyway, this has been around for a while. This chart at the top, it says UFC champions by primary fighting style. And it's been around for quite a bit of time. Let me zoom in right here. It looks like 2018. So this data, according to this data, this is the UFC, so it's not factoring other types of MMA promotions, just taking in the champions of the UFC. It says that there's 28 champions that came from a base style of wrestling, 17 from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 12 from boxing, 6 from kickboxing, 4 from Muay Thai. Notice they separated kickboxing and Muay Thai. 2 from Taekwondo and 1 from karate. I would assume I can't even tell. That looks like the one from karate. It looks like the photo. I thought it'd be Machida, but it looks like the photo is of Australian fellow or New Zealander. I kind of forget. Anyway, Robert Whitaker. There you go. So what do you guys think about this? Right now, I get, obviously I have a lot of wrestling friends. And so when I scroll through Instagram, Facebook, I'm going to see a lot of wrestling people proud to post that wrestling is the best style. And by the way, the title that's going around right now is the UFC did not prove that jiu-jitsu was the ultimate art. Okay. But it was wrestling. So anyway, little knock on jiu-jitsu. I read through a few comment sections and I read stuff like, man, Kron Gracie, after watching Kron and it's just jiu-jitsu's just gotten such a bad name now, right? And it's all about wrestling. Khabib Nurmagomedov and all the rest. I mean, there's so many wrestlers from Daniel Cormier to John Jones to Frankie Edgar, Demetrius Johnson, so many. My thoughts, I had some thoughts on this. So some of it is just, I'll try to get these thoughts out as quick as I can so I don't drag this thing on. I'm already here for 4 minutes. Let's get it out. So first, let's talk about what most everyone says. Wrestling is the best because it's like the intermediate between, it's the bridge between striking and grappling. If you want to stay on your feet and strike, you need wrestling because wrestling is going to keep you on your feet. If you don't know how to wrestle, somebody can take you down. And if you want to submit somebody or ground and pound them on the ground, you need wrestling to get it there. If you're a jiu-jitsu guy and you're great with your submissions, but you can't take the fight to the ground with the exceptions of like a Ryan Hall who's going to Imanari roll right into a leg lock on BJ Penn, with the exceptions of those jumping guard scenarios where you jump into some guillotine or leg lock or some other flying triangle, which don't come very often. You need wrestling. You need wrestling to get it to the ground so you can do it. Guys like Islam Makhachev, Habib Nurmagomedov, they take the fight to the ground using their wrestling skills. Obviously, the judo people out there and the sambo people want me to give it to sambo and judo, whatever. They obviously have an influence from them all. I would uh, like to argue that they are mostly wrestling in the way that they fight, but they obviously use judo as well. But because it's no gi, I gotta say it's more wrestling. I mean, judo and wrestling share a lot, so we share a lot. Especially when you come from a Russian style of wrestling, they have a little bit more of the throws and the judo involved in their wrestling, and that kind of makes it where, from an American point of view, we see some of their movements as judo, for example. But it's all wrestling, grappling to me. Anyway, all right. So that's what most everybody says. Wrestling is the bridge between striking and grappling. So you absolutely have to have it. And that's the reason why wrestling is king. Another one. Wrestlers are just the toughest. They're the most well-conditioned athletes in the world. So that's a big one. The sport of wrestling is very short. It's not as long as an MMA fight, but it's very intense. Like in America, high school wrestlers wrestle 3 2-minute rounds and at a furious pace. College is 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. So much shorter than MMA. So when you look at like, professional boxing, kickboxing, they'll probably do more like 3 minute rounds, which just sounds, a little bit longer. And especially when it comes to championship boxing, 12 rounds, it's a lot longer. Um, but the pace is not as furious as wrestling. So, fighters are standing up straight, more or less, with a little bend in the knees. Wrestling is crouched. It would be very, very difficult to wrestle for 12 3-minute rounds. Obviously, if that's the way the sport was, it could be done, but that's just not the way the sport is. Now, I mentioned folk style in America. Let's move on to freestyle and Greco Roman. We're talking about 2 3-minute periods. Think about that. So we're talking about 6 minutes. You know, 6 minutes, it's not that long. Wrestling just creates a pace that most athletes have never felt before. So there's something there. Um, the toughness of wrestling, I mean, it's everything. It's upper body, it's lower body. It's even though there's no striking, there's a lot of pounding, a lot of heavy collar ties, a lot of snaps, headbutting that naturally occurs, which really toughens the athlete. And these are a lot of the reasons why wrestlers fare really well in MMA, even though in the sport of wrestling they're not punching and kicking. They're pretty well prepared for impact. Um, the push is just so physical. So those are the things that everyone says. That one of the things that I'm going to point out that I'm sure many of you probably know this, but maybe there's people out there that don't know this, and I'm sure there's a lot because I don't think it gets talked about. I think it gets grouped in. You'll listen to a Joe Rogan podcast and he'll talk about how great wrestling is, and it'll get brought in, but we're not doing it justice. And I think I can add something to the table. Um, Something that people don't understand. I want to go on a tangent a little bit, and I'm going to talk about jujitsu. As you guys know, I love jujitsu. I love mixed martial arts. I love kickboxing. I love boxing. I love wrestling. I love them all. Now, um, the the thing about jujitsu, let me tell you something. Jujitsu is very popular across the United States. Let's just talk about United States because if you go to other countries, it can change. I mean, there's some countries where I get I get written messages all the time, and they're like, we don't have any jujitsu in our country. Is there any way you can help us, Coach Brian? And I'm like, no, sorry. I don't think I can go to Serbia or something. But anyway, let me let me say this. Just in the US, jiu-jitsu is very popular. Okay. For adults, it's easier to do. Wrestling is a young man's sport, as they say. Jiu-jitsu is done at a pace that is just a little easier for the average guy. He's an insurance salesman, sits at a desk, makes phone calls. When he gets off work, he can, drive down to the academy, put on a gi, strap on his blue belt, purple belt, his brown belt, his white belt, his black belt, and he can do jiu-jitsu and get a great workout. It's good for his life. It's a great martial art, and it keeps him going. But when it comes to combat, it isn't made for combat anymore. And I've witnessed jiu-jitsu change. I talk about this a lot since the 90s. I'm not saying that jiu-jitsu was the biggest, baddest thing in the 90s, but it has certainly been, much, much more. It's docile. It's what do we call it when dogs are domesticated? The wolf has been domesticated into a dog, and he can still bite really hard at times, but he's lost his fight a little bit. So, having said that, I want to say this. Look, in my town, in my valley, my little pocket, which is in Los Angeles County, just north of Los Angeles, we have, I'm just going to say, about 10 jiu-jitsu schools in my town. Now, I'm the only one that has wrestling. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that the others can't do takedowns. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we have wrestling at our school. We train wrestlers. We train MMA fighters. And some of the other schools, I'm sure they work on their takedowns, and they're good schools. I mean, we've got some good instructors in our town, and they're great at jiu-jitsu. But out of these 10 schools, and it could be more, I'm pretty sure it's close to that number. And this is probably true all across the United States. Let's just say out of 10 schools, there's an average of, I don't know if I could say 100 students, because maybe they don't all have 100 students. We have approximately 200 students, let's say, at my school. At these 10 schools, just for the sake of argument, let's just say there's 100 students on average. I've got 200 plus, but let's just say that there's 100 at each of these 10. That's 1,000 athletes, counting youth and adults. Okay. There's 1,000 athletes in this town that do jiu-jitsu. How many of these jiu-jitsu athletes compete? I would bet money it's 5% or less. I would put money on it. Even if it was 10%, which it's not, that would mean that there's 100 athletes in this area that I live in, this little town. Just think about that. 10 schools, 100 athletes, 10 athletes per school. And I don't think it's even that. I'll bet that most of the schools on average probably have 5. They probably have 5 people that compete on average. Some maybe a little more, some probably less. So somewhere we're in this ballpark. There's something different here. And this is the difference. Jiu-jitsu does not compete. And everyone would then, that's in the world of jiu-jitsu, would say, what are you talking about? There's jiu-jitsu competitions every month. There's all over the place. There's Jiu-Jitsu World League, and there's, over here on the West Coast, we've got the SJJIF, and then there's Grappling X, and then there's IBJJF. And if you want to travel, you can go to Vegas and do Naga, and Naga comes up, there's all these tournaments, and there's in-house tournaments. Schools are holding their own tournaments. I really don't think they understand. So you don't understand wrestling. Jiu-jitsu does not compete. They're they have tournaments all the time, and it's the same people competing, with an exception every once in a while where, every tournament you got a couple people doing their first time, but there just isn't competition. The average athlete that competes consistently, what are they going to get? 5 tournaments a year? That's active. That's an active jiu-jitsu competitor. If you're really, really active, maybe you do like 10. Maybe you do 10 a year. But you got to understand, you're few and far between. Most people, man, there's a lot of people. They do 1 tournament a year, 2 tournaments a year. And those are the they're actually people that say, "Hey, I compete." And they do 2 to 3 tournaments a year. You don't compete in jiu-jitsu, guys. So, this is a huge factor. This is enormous. I think the ADCC is amazing when I watch it. But overall, jiu-jitsu doesn't compete. Karate, taekwondo, kickboxing, you don't compete. Boxing, you're not competing. You guys do not understand what wrestling does. Guys, I am at a wrestling tournament every single weekend. This weekend is the first weekend I have not gone to a wrestling tournament of the year. It's the first weekend I have not gone to a wrestling tournament, with the exception of possibly Easter weekend. And I'm still not sure. I think I went to a tournament on Easter weekend. I just want to make sure I'm accurate. But serious, we're now towards the end. We're mid-May, mid to late May. And now I got my first free weekend. Guys, my months, my weekends in January, February, March, I'm going to tournaments on Thursday. I'm going to matches on Thursday. I'm coaching on Friday. I'm coaching on Saturday. I'm coaching on Sunday, wrestling every single weekend. They compete every weekend. And then when they go to competitions, it's not like jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu competitions, you have 1 guy in your division. Happens all the time. You have 2 people in your division. I'm going to wrestling tournaments with 32 people in a bracket, 64 in a bracket. We're wrestling anywhere between sometimes just 2 matches. We have the same problem every once in a while, in kids divisions. We have 2 to 3 guys in a bracket, but at least we round robin them so they get 2 to 3 matches in a day. Jiu-jitsu, all the time. Podium has 3 people on it, 2 people on it, 1 match. You lose 1 match and you get third. You auto medal. You get a 3rd place medal. Happens all the time. In wrestling, we're wrestling 5, 6, 7, 8 matches in a weekend. It's so and then when you do that every single weekend, this is what creates what Joe Rogan, I've been talking about this a lot. Wrestlers are so tough. They're so strong. This is what it is, guys. If kickboxing did it, which again, you could also argue that their brains would be scrambled eggs, you wouldn't be able to compete that much. It wouldn't be good on your brain. So putting that aside, what I'm talking about is the competition factor of wrestling. We just literally compete more than everyone else. It's a huge advantage. Kids from 5 years old are competing every single weekend, not throughout the whole year. We take little breaks. Summertime, you do summer camps. You show up at a gymnasium and you wrestle all day long for like anywhere between 4 and 8 hours. And some of these camps, you sleep overnight, wake up the next day, and you do it again. These kind of camps, jiu-jitsu just does not have. They have jiu-jitsu camps, and they do something similar, but it is not at the pace that wrestling does. And the practices, the workouts, they're more intense. And again, when you take a child, Not everybody starts at 5 years old, but I'm just giving you what it is. Look, it's in the school system. If jiu-jitsu was in the school system and they competed in the school system and it went to where wrestling was, you would see a drastic change in jiu-jitsu. But anyway, it's one reason, it's a massive reason why wrestling does so well in MMA. These MMA wrestlers, all of them, just pick them out in your head. And they are tough and just well trained for MMA. Guys, like I got a guy named Anton Kalista. You guys know Anton? You guys have seen him on my channel. Anton Kalista is very new to jiu-jitsu. He's been with us a few years now, and he does not train jiu-jitsu like super hardcore. He's not like, all right, let's get ready for ADCC and just every day. He's not like the guys over at B Team, over at New Wave. He's not doing that every day. But he's already had wrestling. He's got that foundation. And we still have him ranked as a blue belt, but he will give a black belt a run for his money. Any purple, brown, black belt, they're gonna have a tough time with Anton. And he's gonna submit some of them. Not everybody. He's not, but and that's just with his little dabbling in jiu-jitsu, learning what he can from me in the classes. He's gonna be and so everybody knows about this experiment. Everybody's got a wrestler. Now, we're not talking about the guy that just dabbled in wrestling a little bit in high school and he's just kind of tough, but then you guillotine him every day. We're talking about guys that were D1 college wrestlers. I'm not saying all of them. Some of them are dumber than shit and they don't get it. But there's so many that just adapt. You get them throwing some punches and some kicks and they don't look super sharp right in the beginning, but they're so tough in a matter of a few months, and they're already able to hang with kickboxers that have been training for years. So it's just an incredible foundation. Now, I want to say, I want to finish with this. I'm talking a lot. Wrestling is amazing, but by itself, like literally just by itself with nothing else, it's neutered. It doesn't pack a punch. If you take a wrestler and you've never shown him mixed martial arts on TV, he doesn't watch it too much. He's never thrown punches. He's never choked anyone or been shown submissions. Those wrestlers don't do so well. On its own, wrestling is not as good as kickboxing. On its own, it's not as good as jiu-jitsu. Without a doubt, not as good as jiu-jitsu. And when I'm talking about jiu-jitsu like real, the other problem is we and I admit it, jiu-jitsu now has moved into this. It's a different animal. It's a chihuahua now. It's no longer a pit bull. It's a chihuahua. Back in the old days, jiu-jitsu used to love to use a pit bull as its mascot. Nowadays they should use a corgi. But but wrestling's really, really tough. But when you go back in time and you look at guys like Dan Severn, he was tough. We're talking about a big heavyweight, but he didn't really want to exchange punches, did he? He was one of the wrestlers that kind of like, he just wanted to take you down. And if he could squeeze you, he could squeeze your neck, or he could punch you or slap you, and, he could ground and pound you. Keep in mind that he was learning very fast as it went on, though. Guys like Don Fry is a little bit different beast. Guy had some boxing, so he's not the best example. So again, wrestling on its own, not really all that hot. But once you get a wrestler and you train him for a year, teach him how to punch and kick, teach him some submissions, They know what these triangles are. They know what these guillotines are. They know what these arm bars are. And they're not just going to stick their arm out like a dummy anymore. They're a huge handful for anyone. And that's why wrestling is where it is on that chart. That's why wrestling's up there. And again, the competition factor is unless you've done it, you have no clue. And I'm not trying to say that kickboxers don't work hard. I'm not trying to say that boxers don't work hard or jiu-jitsu athletes don't work hard. There's many that will train incredibly hard. But it's just that the pool is so small and people do not even know how small it is. You know, they don't know how large the wrestling pool is. Just California alone, I've given this stat a million times. 1,000 wrestlers in every weight class. 1,000. Do the math. And it's more than that. But we have 1,000 high schools that participate in wrestling. 14 weight classes from 106 to let me get this right, 285. Okay. If I get the right, I believe I have the right math on that because heavyweight used to be 275. I think they moved it to 285, if I'm not mistaken. So 106, 285, 14 weight classes. Sliced up very competitively with 1,000 kids in the state of California, all trying their best to become the best. And that's just high school athletes. That's high school. And remember, there's backups. I'm talking about the varsity kid. Now, at some schools, their varsity kid is as good as a JV kid at another school. But we're still talking about 1,000. There's no way you would have 1,000 times 14 kickboxers all competing to be the best in the state. Instead, you would have a much smaller pool and they wouldn't be competing for a state title. Jiu-jitsu, let's go now call it jiu-jitsu. They would be calling it the world championship or they would be calling it the national championship. The pool is so much smaller, judo included. Judo is so small in the United States. Now, I know in other countries, judo is a bigger deal, but in the U.S., it's so small. You can't even find a tournament. You know, they're so hard to find. And the schools that compete, you're lucky to find them. So wrestlers, there's just a gigantic pool of competitive wrestlers. And so you take these guys who come from such humble beginnings where they're forced to run every day and grind and lift weights and show up to practice and cut weight, as much as I hate that subject, and I want to talk about that soon. It just creates an animal that is just geared towards a fight like MMA. So, but you do have to teach them how to punch and kick. You do have to teach them submissions. Wrestling would be in a world of hurt if they did not have kickboxing coaches and jiu-jitsu coaches to complement what they already have. And that's what there is. The wrestling coaches are all at universities, high schools. There's very few wrestling coaches at the martial arts schools. I mean, it's becoming more popular for sure, but they're all at the high schools, coaching high school, and they're at universities. But when a wrestler then he finishes college and then or high school and walks right into his local jiu-jitsu school, he's now getting fed from a black belt in jiu-jitsu and fed from a kickboxing champ. And that's part of the reason. So what I am saying is wrestling without a doubt is king. That foundation is king. But man, they wouldn't get where they were without those great kickboxing, boxing, even karate coaches, jiu-jitsu coaches, sambo coaches, judo coaches, insert coach from traditional martial arts. You know, when they train these guys, they're the perfect putty to form into an amazing athlete. So Guys, that's why wrestling is at the top of that chart. And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. I really don't. I think that there's guys out there like GSP. I wonder where they put GSP in that, because GSP is always, a lot of people call him a wrestler, but he's not. He's more of a karate guy that learned how to wrestle and learn jujitsu. But his foundation definitely was not wrestling, but he did use wrestling a lot in his fighting style. So I think that chart has to do with where they came from. Then you've got the other factor. You've got wrestlers that don't even wrestle anymore, like Justin Gaethje. Obviously he might use his wrestling to stay on his feet when he's not fighting Nurmagomedov, because Nurmagomedov is still going to take you down. But you got some wrestlers that just anti-wrestle. They use their wrestling for anti-wrestling. So there's all these, maybe the data could be skewed a little. I'm not sure. I don't know. I just know that wrestling's great. And I absolutely believe that wrestling is, let's just put it like this. When a guy walks in the door and he says he was a college level wrestler, I get more excited about that than when he tells me, oh, I did jujitsu down at Gracie Baja. I just go, oh, great. Let's get on the mat. Let's see what you got. If a guy tells me, oh, I'm a karate black belt, or I'm a taekwondo black belt, or I did Muay Thai, I'm like, oh, great. Let's get out here, guys. Let's see what you got. But when a guy tells me that he wrestled D1 college or D2 or even D3, and he's been wrestling since he was 10, something like that, my ears perk up a little bit. Let me just say it like that. I'm always talking about the problems of jiu-jitsu, guys. Jiu-jitsu's guard pulling, it's a cancer. Makes us good at guard, so there's a positive. Makes us just perform like Chrome Gracie at the other end. So anyway, all right, guys, that's all I got. I just went over 30 minutes. I'm gonna have to get some other work done, but I'm gonna read a few comments and then let's see what we have. So first one, thank you so much for the super chat. We got $5 dropped by All Strike. You're up first, Coach. If they made weigh-ins closer to competition time, would that discourage extreme cutting? Less time to recover, and you'd still feel weak. Yeah, I think so. I think it would. I think people would. The problem with that, Ostrike, is I think that people would say that it's unhealthy, that you're taking risks. Um, like there's a point where if you put weigh-ins really close to the competition, people will cut weight less. But then you're going to have that occasional guy who tries to do it. And then if he does fight and he lost a lot of weight, and then if let's just say the worst happens, he dies in the cage because of it, it's going to make people push it the other way, like what they have now, where the UFC is giving you more than 24 hours. I mean, guys are getting like 36 hours, to recover. It's insane. Sometimes. So I want to talk about weight cutting on another video sometime, because it's a whole nother subject. But I'll tell you right now, I'm not in favor of cutting weight, and I want to get into that on another video. But if you moved it, let's just say you moved that weight, the weigh-in, like immediate, like literally, like you step on the scale, you walk into the octagon. I do believe that most fighters wouldn't even take the chance. Their trainers, I would like to believe their trainers would say, yeah, this is ridiculous. We're not cutting weight. Maybe a pound, maybe 2 pounds. That's it. It's just not worth it. If they could step on a scale, walk into the octagon, and then drink a little water, just you know, and okay, I'm fighting at my weight. I lost 1 pound, and now I'm gonna fight. I mean, I do think that that would discourage the cutting if it was literally right before, but they wouldn't do it. There again, you got so many arguments with the guys won't make weight, and then what do we do if they don't make weight? And will the fight go on? You know, there's all these problems. So that's a whole subject, man. I would love to dive into it. So, Ostrike, thank you so much for the super chat. So anyway, if there's anybody else, if you want to be first, definitely do it. If you guys drop some change, anyway. Um, yeah, I'm just scanning through. I see somebody said guard pulling. Yeah, guard pulling, big problem of jujitsu. Doesn't help jujitsu much. It is interesting though, if you notice, guys, that on that chart, jujitsu is still pretty high. At least this is up into 2018. It says 17 champs came from BJJ. So, you know, as much as so many people like to shit on jujitsu, they're still doing pretty damn well. Now, again, I don't know how much these stats have changed um, over the last few years. So, um, let's see. Someone saying, Coach, what do you think about wrestling in a street fight? Yeah. I mean, if you got to use it, use it. I don't know what else to say. I, you know. So, Mark Taylor, thank you so much. You learned so much from the likes of me and Eric Paulson and Magomedov. Awesome. Thank you. What about judo and boxing in the street? I mean, yeah, guys, it's all look, the competitive martial arts, I always speak highly of them, you know. The competitive martial arts, it's hard, it's hard for me to really back the martial arts that don't have a sport. And I know I'll hurt feelings when I say it, but there's martial arts like JKD, as much as it's meant to be a very progressive style that takes from everything, utilize what works, you know, and you know, I compliment JKD in that. But the problem is there's so many JKD people out there that just they're not competing. So because they don't, unless they spar. Now maybe some of them spar and they're better off, they fare better than the guys that don't spar. But the guys that go out and compete, and then you got the guys go, well, competition's not real. They're not grabbing balls in competitions. Real fight. You're grabbing balls. And it's like, oh my gosh. Guys, there's a level. So we have martial arts practice. Let's call that right here. You're doing martial arts practice. We can even do a subset there and just say, you know, you got the lowest form, you got like katas, and then you got like drilling techniques, and then you got like drilling technique, you know what I mean? Drilling techniques at a higher pace or higher level. And then you got sparring. Now, how strong is your sparring? Is your sparring low level sparring, like a lot of jujitsu schools, where you're just having fun, you're keeping it playful? Still, that takes you above the guy who just practices katas or goes through the movements. He wants to learn, you know, his 20 techniques, self-defense techniques. So that guy's better off. Then you got harder sparring. Then you got sparring that is, let's call it combative, multi-levels, like grappling and striking mixed. So you got that kind of training. And then you got, but you got above all that, guys, I'm telling you, you know what beats even that is just being in your sport, even though it doesn't mix the arts, but it does it with a referee. And as much as the self-defense guys out there hate sport, they don't, they're neglecting that when you go into a competition and there's even a small crowd and a coach telling you what to do while a referee is and judges are there and there's a crowd, it ups the ante and it just takes the nerves to a higher level. And when you do a lot of that, you get a lot of that. That's what I was talking about that wrestling has, and it has more of it than any other. Just nobody else can compete. At how many times a wrestler gets on a mat and shakes hands with someone when it's all on the line, even though they're not grabbing balls and punching each other in the face. That there is worth more than the hard sparring in training. It just is. And it's the best preparation, you know. So what if you're a karate guy, taekwondo guy, or a jiu-jitsu guy, or a boxer, a kickboxer, and you're thinking about getting into MMA? What could you do? You could go to competitions, do your point Muay Thai or even your amateur level kickboxing Muay Thai competitions. Do your sparring with your boxing. Do your jiu-jitsu tournaments. But you know what? Get get to some wrestling tournaments. It's kind of hard to find them for the. I know I talked about how easy they are, but I'm talking about for adults. Now you might have to travel a little bit, but so do people for jiu-jitsu. Go to these open tournaments and get some of that. Get some of the wrestling. Shake somebody's hand with a referee and try to stay on top of somebody. Try to take somebody down and not let them take you down and stay on top. That is going to prepare you a ton for MMA. Okay, guys? So that's what I have. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this little yap. And I just want to say to everyone, like always, thank you so much for all your support. Teach Me Grappling, the YouTube channel, I it's way bigger than I ever thought it ever could be, even now. And obviously, it's always steadily growing. We've got a lot of support from so much of you guys. I get messages every day, and I'm now at a point where I cannot reply to everybody. So thank you so much. We just had another super chat, so I guess I'm going to address this in a second. But thank you so much, everyone that supports, even if you guys don't do it financially. Thank you so much for watching. It's huge for me. My gym has blown up. We've got people coming from all around, and it's just there's people visiting from outside the country, inside the country. They come here. They want to meet me and learn, and it's incredible. And I've established so many relationships with so many of you, and thank you so much. So, all right, last one. We've got Alejandro Galindo Lavelle. Thank you so much. $20. Hi, coach. Thank you for all the great content. I recently got my father started in jiu-jitsu at 64 years old. We've watched your content together for the past 4+ years and learned something new every time. That's super awesome, Alejandro. Thank you so much. And that's awesome that your father is 64. Think about that, guys. 64. Now, let me say this. I'm not done now. Listen. The way wrestling is taught at most schools, it's so screwed up. It is a young man's sport at most places. You cannot be 64 at most places. Most places, they don't know how to put on the brakes and flow enough. And that's one thing that I got to commend jiu-jitsu. And it is the kind of thing to give to a older gentleman. And guess what? Wrestling can be done that way as well. And that's something that I pride myself in doing, in teaching wrestling to older gentlemen at my school. So there's people out there, guys, I get it all the time. And they say, uh, you know, I've been wanting to come to your school. I've been wanting, they live in my area. They go to another jujitsu school and they go, I've been wanting to train at your school, but I'm so afraid because you guys, they think that we're going to kill them because we have wrestling mixed with our jujitsu. They think that they're going to get smished, a la Habib. And it's like, yes, we can smish you if you want, but that's not what we're about, guys. There's people here that want, if you want to come to my gym and train hard and get after it, you can do that. But if you want to be a 64-year-old and come to my gym and just learn and even get sparring in that is safe, that you can do at your pace, you can do that here too. Now, what are the numbers? It's few. There's just not a lot of guys in their 60s that train, and that goes for any school. But they can do it here too. And it's because when you teach wrestling, you have to teach it more similar to the way that remember how I mentioned jujitsu has gone from a wolf to a corgi or a chihuahua? It's no longer a pit bull. It's now a little more docile, little safer animal to be around, that can still bite you every now and then. It's even though jujitsu's done that, wrestling can do that too. And guess what? It's necessary for older gentlemen because we want to learn, but we can't get hurt in the process, because if we get hurt in the process, we can't train wrestling. How do we train wrestling if we just, there's not only one way. It's not the only way. And that's one thing that I pride myself in is, one, taking care of the young guys and giving them what they need, giving them the hard training, the wrestling that I was taught. At the same time, teaching them the flow that we have in jiu-jitsu. And also it's in wrestling in few places, but it's out there. The technical side of wrestling, not the, I'm going to beat the shit out of you with collar ties wrestling and just bang you up and headbutt you into submission so that I can get my takedown. You know, that's not going to go too well once you guys get past your 30s. So, and some guys even in their 30s can't handle that style. So anyway, that's what I have for you guys. Again, I love you guys. Thank you so much for all your support. All right. Take care, guys. Alejandro, thank you so much. I really hope you come and visit this summer. That would be amazing. Oh, you're in the Bay Area. Cool. So we're just down the 5 freeway. Come down. If you're in the Bay Area, and you just come down the 5, man, or the 99 to the 5. And or if you want to come down the 101, you come down the 101 down to Ventura, and then just head east, and you'll hit us right there at the top of Los Angeles County. So thank you so much. Appreciate you, Alejandro. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world. So, all right, guys, like, share, subscribe, man. All right. Thank you so much for all your comments. I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to read them, but maybe get some ideas for a future video. Thank you guys so much. See you guys next time with more great stuff.